history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other. Before we figured out there were other people to kill, we just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people, right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude, no more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon, the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy. They said that at the time. We lie about it now. And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war, right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them, whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right? Rich folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs, and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now, right? Well, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please, right? So that's been a long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I got to charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job, right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system. That would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens? When you go out on strike, who is the boss going to use to replace you? They're going to replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than the white rich dude for giving it to them, right? Divide and conquer, telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric, telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. My name is Dash Lifestyle. Kindly for watching me for the first time. Remember to subscribe, like, share, and also comment. So guys, I hope you have watched that video from American professor coming out and tell us exactly how the white people, they are fearing black people, because the white people, they fear black people unity, because they don't want black people to unite, because they know there is power in unity. So they are doing anything possible to make black people not to unite. And also he has talked about how the black people, they are being treated in the United States, how the black people, they are being given less opportunity. The white folks, they don't want to see black people are being successful than them. So they are doing anything possible to give the black people a low opportunity, a less opportunity. And also you can see the kind of racism and discrimination they are doing to the black Americans. And also guys, I want us to continue watching this video from Dr. Umar Johnson. Dr. Umar Johnson also, he has come out and talk about the racism, or how the black people, they are going through racism in United States. And also he has talked about some of the challenges and the struggles that the black people, they are going through in the United States. So kindly guys, watch this video till the end, then I'll be back with more comments.
Racism.
That's
and
right.
I think we have to call it exactly what it is. This is cultural erasure. We've seen it happen before. When black people were brought from Africa over here, forced to be here, they erased our culture from us. They took our religion away. They took our names away. They took our heritage, everything that related us to Africa. They took it away and replaced it with Western culture. That's what you're doing right now in education. When you look at the AP classes that are taught right now in the state of Florida, you have Chinese language and culture, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Latin, and Spanish. But you can't have African American studies. I have a huge problem with this. And this is a course that was created and cultivated with certain expertise and experience. Henry Louis Gates Jr. was a part of this. This isn't just some thing that they threw together at the last minute. It is put together to teach you about us and who we are through arts and literature, as you were saying, science, civil rights, political science, geography. There's so much more to it. And if every other culture can be taught except for black culture, that's racist.
That's right.
Yeah, and
stop calling ourselves people of color. They're using that against us. By calling ourselves people of color and we stop using black, we're helping to extinguish our voice in the public conversation, because nobody's hearing black no more. Nobody's hearing American or African no more. Most black people, when they describe themselves, what do they say? I'm a person of color, people of color. By doing this, you're lumping yourselves up with the Latinos, the Arabs, the East Indians, the Native Americans, the homosexuals, the women. Here's the problem with that. Once they get us calling ourselves people of color, which they've already have, let's say 2 years, right? For 2 years, most black people have stopped identifying as black. They now say people of color. They're going to get to a point where you're completely identified with all these other non-white people who can't stand you any more than the Caucasian. And then you know what they're going to do? They're going to flip all these other people of color against your interests. Let me give you an example of how they're doing it right now. There's surveys being carried out across America, where they're asking other people of color, reds, yellows, browns, poor whites, what do you think about reparations to black people? This is what they're doing right now. It's happening now. And guess what the Asians are saying? I don't think they need reparations. America isn't racist. What do you think the East Indians are saying? I don't think they need reparations. America isn't racist. What do you think the Native Americans and the European Jews are saying? I don't think they need reparations. America isn't racist. So the same people you identify with as people of color, when questions come up about your issues and your agenda, they can cancel it. Why? Because all the other people of color who you now identify with have taken a vote and said, y'all don't need reparations. Let me give you another example. Let's say you have a child, your son, we got black boys in public schools in Nashville. They're catching all kind of hell, special ed hell, ADHD hell, psychiatric med hell, right? You say this school is racist. It's you and 5 other black mothers. This school is racist. You black father, black. This school is racist. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to have a meeting of parents of color. Look at this now. It's a black issue, but you don't call yourself black no more. You've identified with your enemies of other color. They're going to call people of color, and they're going to talk to all the people of color. And they're going to say, do y'all think we are targeting the boys of color? You're not targeting the Arabs. You're not targeting the Latinos. You're not targeting the East Indians. You're targeting black. But because we handcuffed ourselves into this new identity of people of color, whenever they want to suffocate the black voice, all they got to do is ask the other people of color, what do you think about it? And we're done. Stop calling yourself a person of color. Be black. We better stop and change that public narrative back, especially now with the migrant crisis. They're going to suffocate the hell out the black agenda.
And we saw such a passionate and compassionate and empathetic, like, race of people that shoe on the other foot. I'm like, hell yeah, give them reparations.
Yep.
Hell yeah, give them like
Yep.
whatever it is.
Yep.
Like
Nobody speaks for us. We keep saying black and brown. When have you heard brown people speak about blacks? They don't.
No, they don't.
They don't. Black and brown. Every black. Why you can't just say black? Because we have been bullied into feeling uncomfortable, only articulating our own issues. Black people are the only people who don't feel comfortable just fighting for black issues. Jews only fight for Jews. Latinos only fight for Latinos. Arabs only fight for Arabs. Mexicans only fight for Mexicans. Black people fight for everybody. And here's the Achilles heel of that mindset. If you're going to make everybody else's issue as important as your own, why should we care about your issue? By bringing them in, you automatically demote the seriousness of your issues. Multiculturalism was a trap the whole time. And one of the reasons I say multiculturalism was a trap the whole time, did you know Mexicans were once legally considered white in this country? Did you know East Indians were once legally considered white in this country? Did you know the Japanese sued in court to be white in this country, but they lost? Did you know Arabs are considered white right now in this country? Look at this. People of color? Harold, how is this a genuine people of color when every group in this people of color group used to be considered white and wish they could again be considered white? So why would you unite with them? They're using our self-hate and our love of outsiders to trap us into a corner where we can't crawl out of.
That's dirty.
It's a trap, the multicultural trap. We got to go black to all black everything. I've been pushing it. Garvey said it 100 years ago. There's nothing new about it, but black people better wake up to it right now because it's on our front door now.
The pride that's associated with being black, like I feel like the brainwashing is ran too deep.
It is ran too deep. Yeah.
I think it's ran too deep, and everybody said like everybody can't make it. Like, you know what I mean?
You ain't taking everybody.
You ain't taking everybody.
And if you try to, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You can't take everybody. In fact, if you were to ask me to guesstimate, right, you have about 40 to 50 million Africans in America. Continental Africa is included because as a Pan-Africanist, we all one. Of that 50 million Africans in America, I'm going to say maybe 5 million. I'm going to give you 10%. 90% of us are completely useless, right? Of that 90%, 60% of them are too religious to objectively evaluate our political, social, economic condition and do something about it. The Christ out Christian, I'm not saying anything wrong with Christian. I'm talking about the person who's so Christian that they've lost all connection to reality. You're so Muslim, you've lost all connection to reality. You're so Hebrew, so Jehovah Witness, so Seventh-day Adventist, you've lost all connection to reality. So 60% are gone because most of those religions, excluding the Hebrews, most of those religions teach colorblindism, right? The Christian church indoctrinates all their followers. God don't see color. The masjid, I was raised Orthodox Muslim. I know God don't see color. You feel me? So 60% of us feel that embracing an African first consciousness is against God, which basically means redeeming black people is against God. You see that? If I can't fight for my people alone, then what you're saying is God isn't interested in African redemption, because the only way African redemption happens is if black people focus on themselves. So you got 60% religious. You got another 20%. They are straight up economic opportunists. Do you feel me? They don't give a shit about black power or white power. Yeah. They want green power. They will hustle any part of the struggle to get, they can't see beyond their bank account. And that's a big percentage of black men, by the way. A lot of black men are going to be useless for the freedom struggle because we are so addicted to money. We can't think beyond money, right? And then your last 10, 20%, they so in love with white folks, they would rather die on the Titanic with their slave master than jump on a canoe with their brothers and sisters. You understand? You got a percentage of us who are die-hard, black-skinned white people. And you got people who've been raised 3-4 generations of coons. See, we fail to realize that. And a lot of them go to your HBCUs and your PW, but the great-grandma was a house Negro. Great-great-grandpa was a house Negro. Father was a house, you understand? So they have been indoctrinated. This is how their family operates. We serve the interests of white people, and that's how we protect our own interests. You're only taking 10%.
Hello again. This one really got me off guard, and I do not want to distill these. Do drop your comments on the comment section. We'll be listening, and I can tell you that if I add anything more like right now I'm doing, that might really make it terrible. But again, yes guys, we are going to be sojourning, looking into where did the rain start beating us. So no more people of color, there is blacks, and that is what it is. And now once that particular reality kicks in and materializes, only then shall all the African Americans in diaspora realize their true authenticity and their true value in the global domain. Guys, I'm gonna patch it at this particular point. Let's meet in the next. See you later.
White people fear black men. That's not fair, but it's true.
There was a real fear that if you let blacks get control, everything would change. And there was no, with some people, there was no idea that there would be any fairness or any democracy or anything, you know, that there would be a decent, well-run city government, county government, whatever. It was like, if this happens, we're lost. And it was just a terrible.
When you watch the video of the black men killed by white cops in Louisiana and Minnesota, it brings us into a need for soul searching in the country. All the things Bill Clinton did and said, one of the profound things he ever said at the end of his administration was, on race, we have to get to the roots of black pain and the roots of white fear. Clinton, a white kid from the South, had seen everything. And white fear is that you walk down the street, like Barack Obama said about his white grandparents, and they're afraid because they have black men walking about 30 feet behind them. Black pain, you've been stopped for no reason while walking to the mall, or you've been asked by an usher at a basketball game to show your ticket when the 4 white friends from the office sitting next to you don't have the usher ask them for their tickets. That's black pain and white fear, and together you could see it with these cop incidents. The white cops in Minnesota and in Louisiana showed fear on their faces. In Minnesota, because the gentleman said he had a permit for a concealed carry, and when he went for his wallet, the cop shot him. And the cop was more unhinged than the African-American girlfriend, who remained calm. In Louisiana, somebody shouted he has a gun. You could see the white fear on the face of the cop as he pulled his gun out and shot him in the chest. Dick Gregory, who was an African-American comedian back in the early 60s, once said about racism in the North and South, there's racism in both places. In the South, you can get close to white people, but just don't get too big. In the North, you can get as big as you want, but just don't get too close. We still have racism in this country. We have to get to the roots of black pain and white fear, or more of these things will happen, and it'll keep happening.
Rich, who again is a fairly liberal columnist, and wrote a piece, I think it was in the New York Times, right after or right before the election, where he said that, basically racism is not a problem anymore because when white folks get to know black folks, well, their biases and their fears subside. Now, number one, I'm not sure that's true. But secondly, even if it were true, the truth is, given the history of racism, spatial segregation, residential isolation, the fact that 85% of white folks live in communities with virtually no people of color around, even if he were right, it wouldn't matter because most white folks won't get that opportunity to actually form close, intimate friendships or connections with people of color. And unfortunately, if it isn't happening, the only way we get to know folks of color is via media. So maybe we see Barack Obama on television coming into our living rooms every night. And over an 18-month to 2-year period, we're able to say, yeah, I sort of like that guy. He seems really capable and really bright. Maybe I wasn't sure at first, but given 2 years, he was able to overcome, maybe my first impression. But the only other folks we're seeing in the media are either folks who are sort of superstars on the one hand, or criminals on the other hand. Those are the black folks we typically see on TV. They're either like mega millionaire athletes or entertainers, or they're the folks doing a perp walk on the 6 o'clock news that the cops have just gone arrested and haven't even let them put a shirt on before cuffing them and bringing them out in front of the cameras. If the only people you see regularly are superstar millionaires and thugs, for the average person, they can't relate to either of those, right? The average person of color can't, and the average white person can't either. The superstar, you're likely to envy their position, and the thug you're afraid of. And envy and fear are not particularly good human emotions upon which to base some personal connections or intimate relationships. So I think that's what we're dealing with. Barack Obama or Bill Cosby or Oprah Winfrey or a handful of people of color, we're able to get to know them, or at least we think we know them, via media. But for average everyday white folks and for average everyday black and brown folks, the ability to really get to know each other and overcome those implicit biases is a lot more.
White people fear black men. That's not fair, but it's true. What makes this even more unfair is that in the vast majority of cases, our fear of black men is in no way connected to our personal experience. And if that wasn't unfair enough, study after study has shown, this, that fear of black men doesn't even spring primarily from racism. It's deeper than that. And that's not fair to black people or white people. Most black men have experienced what some people refer to as the fearful gaze of white men and women. Then on the other side of the equation is this: the majority of African Americans in our country, they don't trust the criminal justice system, do you? You fear the police. That's not fair. Facts don't care. The white people who have all but silenced their fear of black men are the white people who have befriended black men or have been befriended by black men and their families. I've been to my share of far right-leaning churches and churches that lean far left. And it's so much easier for those pastors. Everybody pretty much agrees on everything, and everybody else, everybody else is just going to hell, right? It is not enough not to be a racist. It is not enough not to be a racist. Non-racist is not the goal. Being non-racist does nothing to address racism.
There was a real fear that if you let blacks get control, everything would change. And there was with some people, there was no idea that there would be any fairness or any democracy or anything, that there would be a decent, well-run city government, county government, whatever. It was like, if this happens, we're lost. And it was just a terrible fear. Southerners are like any other group of people. There are all kinds of folks that are included. And regardless of where they stood on integration or anything else, there were a lot of really good people who made wrong decisions and not so much did wrong things as failed to do right things. And when you look back on it, try to sort it out and figure out what could have been different. I think one of the things is that people felt a sense of being powerless. Maybe people who would have been willing to go along and go further and move forward sooner wouldn't have had any notion of any way that they could impact this, that anything that they could personally do that would be helpful. You know, even as now, most of us live in a society that we think is far from perfect, and yet between now and 2 weeks from now, we're probably not going to do very much to change it, partly because we have no sense of what we could do. And in the South, it was that way. Even people who were willing to take risk and move out were just not able to visualize what kinds of things could help. Or, you know, how would you get enough people, if everybody that was willing to go to a certain step would move at once, then it would be accomplished. But we were all scattered out there. Nobody knew who else was willing to do what or make what changes. And there was not a lot of leadership. And leadership in the churches was, a lot of it was really forward-thinking and helpful, and then a lot of it was people who knew what the right thing to do was but were terrified of taking any stand that would upset the congregation. There were people in the churches who wanted to keep the peace in the local church, you know, in the congregation, and so they didn't want to do anything that might cause any kind of dissension. Politicians, even people who knew better, who would have been willing to go further personally or to have the state move forward, were always bound by fear of not getting reelected. And so really people who knew better just stuck with racism for political reasons, is what I think. You know, it was, but a lot of it just in average citizens was just that people didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to help. There still are a lot of strange myths floating around in the South. There were a lot of strange tales from Reconstruction. There's an awful lot of fiction that floats about, and so I have no idea what kind of weird notions people had, but mostly I think it is of losing control. You know, I mean, there was some higher level of trust, even of dishonest or corrupt white politicians, than of a black in some position of authority over you, for people who had grown up with these myths and fears, so that it was easier to stick with somebody that you might not have even cared for was white. I know that there were people who actually became physically ill every time there was any big desegregation news. I mean, you could just count on it. If you went to their house, you knew they were going to be in bed. It really just was. This was after I was a grown woman, and it was pretty startling to me to discover that there were people that had that kind of, that were bound in that way to racism. But of course, there are people who are a lot worse that I didn't happen to know personally. For me, there's a lot of guilt that's involved, because growing up, if you grow up and accept things the way they are, then you have to wonder, you know, why did you accept all of this? Why did you not question more? Or, you know, why didn't you think about all these things that were happening? And I don't know what the answer to that is. My great-grandfather was a really good man, but he was really racist also. He, I guess, was influenced a lot by things that happened during Reconstruction. And he was never a violent person, nor was he. It wasn't something that he spent a lot of time thinking about or talking about, but his views were, I remember, mainly his never quite forgiving the Methodist Church for reuniting. You know, there was a Southern Methodist Church for a while, and he didn't think they should have gone back in with the Northern Methodist Church. There were a lot of really good people who were and are racist, and I don't know how you explain or justify, or a lot of people wouldn't even accept the fact that you can be both, but in my belief you can. For instance, there were a lot of people who were willing to accept when Emmett Till was murdered. There were people who were willing to accept the fact that this was, I don't remember if they said it was a prank or what, but I mean, there were stories that this didn't really happen before they found the body, and there were people who were willing to accept that. The same kind of attitude was with almost everything, where there was not an immediate finding of a body. There was always this thing, this is something somebody's made up, you know, just a lot of denial. A lot of people who didn't want to believe that this sort of thing would happen, and would refuse to accept the fact that it was happening. I think there were a lot of people who who did think it would be stopped, who never thought the change would actually happen, even after it was happening. And I think if there had been, if there had not been that attitude, if people had known the change was going to happen anyhow, maybe it would have been faster. Maybe the holding the line would not have been so long and painful. But I think that part of the reason that there was not more change is just that people never did accept it as the reality of the day.
White people are scared to death right now, particularly white males. They're scared to death that they are going to lose their power in the future. And they are. But if you want to get ready for the future, if you want to be treated well in the future, treat others well in the present.
That a lot of the, we'll talk about police brutality. I feel a lot of white men are scared of black men because of their lack of exposure to black men or people of color. I'm not scared of black men. I'm not scared of Latino men. I've been around them my whole life, right? But I feel a white officer might be around a black guy and he feels that emotion. He's scared of the black guy. And next thing you know, the black guy runs. He's got to shoot him because he has the power, because he can pull it out of his pants, and he shoots the guy. And I feel that happens over and over and over again, that white men are just scared or intimidated by black men for no other reason than that they're the color of their skin. And it's really the ignorance and the lack of exposure to those people.
Yeah, I find that interesting that the only thing that seems to scare white people are black men. Literally, they swim with the sharks. They hunt. They go in the mountains and hike with the bears. They go to safaris and hang out with the tigers and the lions. I mean, literally, they go into the ocean and they find these indescribable ocean beings.
They jump off a 1,000-foot cliff.
They jump off of cliffs. They skydive. I mean, literally, white people do everything you can imagine that would kill them. And the one thing that only scares them is black. And that's unfortunate, because our history as black people does not reflect in any way factually that we are a violent people. And I believe Minister Farrakhan said that the best when he said, we don't have a history of killing you.
So guys, I hope you have watched that video and you have listened to what Dr. Umar Johnson, he has come out and talk about racism towards the black people, especially the black Americans. He has talked about how the black Americans, they are being given less opportunity, how the black people, their voices, it is not being heard, because the biggest fear that the black people they are having is to see the black people becoming more successful than them. And also, they are giving less opportunity to the black people, even if the black people they are having, they are more educated than the white folks. The white people, they will not just give the first priority to the black folks. They will give the priority to their fellow white folks, and then the second priority they will give to the black folks. So these are some of the challenges and the struggle that the black Americans they are going through in the United States. And also, he has come out and talk about how the black school and how the black school they are being treated. So if a black children, he has done a mistake in a school, so the white people, they will come to the school and they will come up and call the meeting of the white children. No, they will not just call a general meeting to the all, both black and white children in the United States. No, they will call the white children, the white parents, they will come and call the meeting themselves so that they can discuss on how they can separate their children from the black folks, because these people, they always see black people as bad people, because we have been seeing how the criminal injustice in the United States, they are using black people as a money generator, because any small mistake that a black person, he or she has committed, he can just not work for free. He must pay. He must pay a penalty. But if a white person in America, he or she has done a small mistake, he can go for free. They can leave him or her to just go. But for a black person, he can't just work for free. He must pay. So this is how the criminal injustice in the United States, it is dealing with the black people. And also, we have been seeing where there is a mass shooting, where there is a violent, where there is a fight, the first suspect, it is usually black folks. Yeah, the first suspect, it is usually black folks. And this is to tell you that black people, they are being taken as people people of violent, as a people who are doing so bad things. And this is to tell you also, you can see how these people, they have been painting the image of the Africa where the black people, they are coming from, because I believe that Africa, it is the motherland of the black people. Majority of the black people in the world, they came from Africa, the motherland. So these people, they went ahead in the United States. They are showing the bad image of Africa, how the children, they are dying with hunger, how the people, they are being struggled, how there's a struggle, how there's how the life standard of people in Africa, it is very bad. So these people, they usually show a bad image of Africa to the black people in the United States, so that the black people cannot love Africa, so that the black people cannot just come and love Africa. So this is to tell you that anything bad, anything which it is bad, it is usually from a black person. So these people, they usually do that so that they can divide us black people. There is a time that I was telling you that the black Americans, they were fighting with the black people in the Caribbean, simply because when the black people in the Caribbean, they are coming to the United States to look for job, to look for more opportunity. When they are being given these jobs with the white folks, the white folks, they are going ahead and tell them that the reasons to why we white people, we are giving you black people from the Caribbean this job, it is because the black Americans, they are lazy. The black Americans, they have refused to come and work because these people, they are lazy. They don't love to work, and they are telling them to the black people who they have come from Caribbean to work in America, so that these people can just hate the black Americans. So these are some of the tactics and some of the things that they usually use so that they can divide us black people. But for me, I keep on telling you, my fellow black people, whether you are in the Caribbean, in the black Americans, in Africa, it is time for us to come together. It is time for us to unite, because we have started to learn the tactics of these white folks. So we need not to be confused anymore with these tactics of they are using to divide us black people. So we need to come together. We need to unite, because the biggest fear that these people, they are having, it is to see us black people uniting. That's why they are using our fellow black people to fight us. You can never see a white person come directly to fight a black person. No, if these people, they want to fight us black people, they are using our fellow black people. You can see what happened when they were threatening Ibrahim Traore, because Ibrahim Traore, he refused, he removed all the colonizers, the France in his country. So these people, they went ahead and come and send a United States general, that it is a black general, to threaten Ibrahim Traore. So this is to tell you that these people, they can't just come and fight black people themselves. They usually send a black person to fight their fellow black person. You can see how Barack Obama, he was being used. Because majority of black people, we celebrated when Barack Obama became the president, but he came out and sidelined the black Americans. So this is how these people, they usually use us black people. So right now, we have just learned their tactics, and also I'm so happy to see more educators who they are coming out and educate us black people and teaching us black people about our history and how black people, they are suffering and how black people, they are being treated in the United States. So kindly guys, I want you to like this video if you haven't liked, because when you like this video, according to the YouTube algorithm, will recommend this video to a lot of people. And also, let's talk more on the comment section. Tell me, what do you think about today's topic, and also let's educate one another. So kindly guys, thank you so much. See you on my next one. Bye bye.